Hi, I am Jim Yumang, the Senior Application Specialist of IMCT Philippines Corporation. So basically, what I do is I manage all of the technical, marketing, and regulatory affairs of the Beauty and Personal Care Group of IMCT Philippines Corporation. So today we'll be talking about the effortless enhancement of sensory aesthetics. So, what does this mean anyway? So let me break it down into three parts. So with the first one being the importance of sensations. So here in this section, we will talk about why the sensory aspect is crucial in the development of your products. So I have four examples. These are just a few examples of why the sensoriality of a product is important. So number one, we have consumer acceptance. So consumers make decisions based on the sensations they perceive in a product. So it's not uncommon for a skincare product to be very clinically effective, but they could still be unacceptable to consumers because of one or more of the product's skin feel attributes may not be as pleasing as they thought it would be. So there is a similar concept in the pharmaceutical industry called patient compliance or adherence. So a patient may skip their recommended dose of their medicine because they don't like how the medicine tastes, or in the case of topicals, they don't like how the medicine feels on their skin. Another importance of products in reality is brand loyalty. So, for example, the consumer did decide to purchase a product, but they did not find the product to be pleasing in terms of the sensory feel. They probably won't make the purchase again. In fact, if their dissatisfaction is so very strong, they might actually consider dropping that brand entirely, not just the product, breaking therefore brand loyalty. And then we have market differentiation. So sensory attributes are a great way to differentiate your product from the rest of the competition in the market. So consumers, they often reward products that they find innovative, and the product sensory feel is an immediate perceptible way to do that. A common example for market differentiation via sensoriality are alternative and unique product galenic forms, like solid forms that are usually not solid. Like for example, you have your lotion bars, your shampoo bars. So they give a very unique and exciting experience during application, and they sequester themselves versus the other more common competitors in the market. And the last example for the importance here is the perception of efficacy. So how the product feels can directly influence how the consumer perceives its effectiveness. So for example, take two products, like you have a thick viscous gel and a water thin toner. So for example, these two contain the same amount and type of actives, say 2% niacinamide. So consumers, when given the choice, they will probably choose the thicker gel. They will perceive it as more potent, more effective than the toner, which will they view as like a dilute, less concentrated version, even though they contain, again, the same type and amount of niacinamide. So this shows how powerful sensoriality is in product development, and it should not be just an afterthought in your product. So moving on to the next section, we will discuss the language of touch. So it's not unusual for consumer information to be difficult for the product developer to understand because there might be a disconnect between what the consumer says verbally versus what the product developer knows. So their vocabularies might be so different that they don't understand each other. So let's begin this section with another quote from Bush and Gassenmeyer. So language is the indicator of experience, and it is so twice over. On the one hand, it is language that grants us access to experience of all kinds. On the other, our linguistic ability deepens our ability to experience. So basically, what they're trying to say is that language is the key for us to perceive and to experience, but also expanding the linguistic resources that we have in our disposal, like our vocabulary, the more we can perceive and the more we can experience. So this philosophy will be very evident in this part of the presentation. So cosmetic development. It's not exclusively guided by notions of rational effectiveness, like what we've said a while ago. It is also guided by the notions of sensoriality. Thus, the sensorial properties of a cosmetic product is studied using different methods. So here we have two. Number one is comparing with archetypes or benchmarks. And the other is a more formal characterization, which is called quantitative descriptive sensory profiling or QDSP. So diving into the first one or with the comparing with archetypes. So thinking of the sensory of a product in terms of a benchmark or an archetype offers a very simplistic and easy to grasp method for characterizing sensoriality. And it is quite helpful in the early upstream stages of the product development. So, for example, we have laid out a couple of the archetypes common in the market based on their number one, their heaviness, and number two, versus their viscosity. So, for example, you're trying to develop hand lotion. So you want your hand lotion to be somewhere in the middle heaviness, but with a thick viscosity, with a high viscosity. So you may want to lean into the archetypes found here. So you can use this as a benchmark when thinking about sensoriality. So caudally. So you can use caudally as the benchmark when you're starting the development of your product. So, and also another useful thing about plotting the archetypes is that when you want the sensory attributes, you can also have an idea of what ingredients to use or what like galenic form to create. Like for example, if you want something fresh, if you want something very light, but you want it at a low viscosity, you can look at the archetypes at this plot and then it's you probably have to create like thin water-based toners like this one, like from Clinique and Vichy. Maybe you want the same freshness or lightness, but at a higher viscosity because maybe the consumers will think that this would be more potent, more effective. You can look at the archetypes of this Clinique ID jelly, and maybe you can pattern the development of your product with this archetype. So you can do that for all of the products here. And then now let's look at the other method that we have illustrated. There are many hundreds of methods available, but we are only showing two for this 30-minute webinar. So the other one is the quantitative descriptive sensory profiling or QDSP. So This allows to obtain accurate sensory images of the products, and this is a method that has been used since like the 50s and is one of the most widely used methods of characterization. So in this QDSP, there are by itself multiple variations that exist, which usually they vary on the testing, the procedure of the analysis, the statistical treatment, the duration of the analysis, and a lot of other criteria. So you have probably seen one of these. This is a sensory map. So this is the result of the QDSP. So just an example from a journal. So even though, like I've said, there are multiple variations from QDSP, they largely follow the same steps. So the first one is to set up the panel, wherein you recruit enough panelists to have a robust statistical analysis of the results. Usually you get around 10 to 20 judges. So there is technically no specific jury criteria except for aversion, meaning that the jury, they should not be like allergic to the analyte. And also they should be trained via the lexicon that you will be building on the next step. So I've already mentioned the lexicon, so that's the second one. So you have to build your lexicon. So this is a list of terms basically that will serve as a criteria for the analysis. So it limits which sensory attributes you deem important for a certain product. So for example, when you're trying to analyze a sample of a cream, you probably want to check the absorption or the spreadability of that cream, but you probably don't want to check like a warming sensation if it's not a warming cream or heating. It's just a standard cream. You probably don't have to add that to your list of criteria. And also, once you have built that list, you can now plot those at a sensory map, like the one I've shown a while ago. So you will dive more into this one later. The third step is performing the actual analysis. So this could take several minutes to a few hours, even a few days. It depends on the lexicon you have created, the number of analytes, and the parameters you've set. Like, for example, you need a parameter for temporal effects, which are sensory attributes that are only perceptible during certain times, like the initial step or maybe after 20 minutes. So this can elongate your analysis. And the last general step is, of course, the validation and treatment of data. So creating the results obtained from the analysis to make sure that the data produced by the panelists are actually significant and worth considering. So for example, they usually use ANOVA for the analysis of variance. So this is a statistical computation that is usually employed to make sure that the data from a certain panelist doesn't stray too far from the group. So for example, if you have those 20 panelists, and for some reason one of those 20 has a very different set of data, you probably need to treat and validate that data to make sure that this is correct, because a too large variation might mean that the panelists did not do the analysis correct. So that's where you have to validate all of the numbers that you have received after the analysis. So since this is the section of the language of touch, let's talk a bit more about building the lexicon. So like I've said, you have to select which attributes you want to uh, analyze in a certain product. So for example, you're trying to analyze a certain hand lotion. You probably want to check its absorption or where the wet, moist feeling and the resistance to pressure is no longer perceived. So that's absorption. You probably want to check the spreadability or the ease of moving the product on your skin. You may want to check the film formation or the appearance of whiteness upon application. You may want to check for a dry sensory feel, which is the thin, disappearing feeling, sort of like the surface of paper. Then you may want to check if it has shine. So you probably know what shine is. It's the reflective effect that isn't present on an treated skin surface. You may also want to check for powdery sensory feels. So it's the dry, slippery feeling reminiscent of like talcum powder. And for this, I have limited to 7. So cushioning. So this is the soft, nourishing feeling that is quite substantive, sort of like a pillow. So once you have created your list, you can now plot this into a radar chart. So specifically a sensory map. So you just have to add each term into the vertices of the radar map and add the gradations for your panel to record. So you may also want to take into consideration temporal effects, like what I've said a while ago, the effects that are dependent on time. So for example, number 8 and number 9, thickness and pickup are only present in the initial part of the application, while 10 and 11, residue and tackiness, are only present after a certain number of minutes or hours after application. So incorporating temporal effects, you may will also force you to create several different radar maps depending on the stage of application. So like this one, I have resulted in 4 different radar maps with different attributes for each. Okay. So the last part of the theoretical part of this presentation, we have the market trends and insights. So here in IMCD, we have identified 3 megatrends that encompass not just the sensory attributes of a product, but the entire beauty and personal care industry itself. So we have number 1, making a positive impact. Number 2, experience comes alive. And number 3, in transparency we trust. So these are megatrends that have their own subtrends in it. But I have added the circles in bold where it's the most important ones and the most relevant ones in our country. Like for example, in making a positive impact, sustainability is one of the main facets. For experience comes alive, its sensoriality. And in transparency, we trust its compliance and origin transparency. So as you can see, they are all interconnected with each other, and they all actually, in some manner, correlate as well to sensoriality, not just for experience comes alive. Like for example, a sensory agent, a sensory modifier, would still have to be transparent in its origin, since this is what the market dictates. So, like, did it come from synthetic sources? Did it come from natural sources? In terms of making a positive impact, is that ingredient sustainable? How much energy was consumed during the production of this raw material and consequently this product? How efficient is the process? Is it biodegradable? So what happens to the raw material before it was just the feedstock and then after it has been disposed by the consumer? So everything relates to the sensoriality of the product via these 3 megatrends. So if you want to know more, actually, this is quite a very simplistic view of the megatrends we have identified here in IMCD. So if you want to know more, just contact me by email or this Q&A that will come later. And then we will now move on to the formulation demo part. So this is where your kits come in. So hopefully you have received your kits. So the kit contains one large tub, which is your base cream, and then five smaller tubs, which contain sensory modifiers. Let's now dive into the actual procedure. So starting with the ingredients. So we have here phase A, which are the lipophiles, oils, and phase B, which are some actives and solubilizer. Yeah. Phase C, which is just water. Yeah. And phase D, which is a preservative and a yield enhancer. So diving into the actual steps, the first one is basically just combining phase A. So like I've said a while ago, I did use some solid emollient, specifically shea butter and colonial monolaurin here. I did have to heat this gently for around 45 degrees C. But if you're using completely liquid emollients, no need for this heating step. You just have to combine powder feel with your liquid oils until it's properly dispersed. So you can see, as you can see, powder feel is a solid, but it will disperse easily in oils. Next step, for phase B, combine cauliflower, which is a solubilizer, then add Formblin HTR, which is PFPB. So this is an active that protects the skin, and Hibietol Pastillo, which is an active that is an antimicrobial as well as a deodorizing agent. So combine these three until it's properly dispersed. And then you can add this phase into the original oil phase. Literally, just at low shear, just add that. Combine them until they're properly dispersed. And then you can, once phase B and A is properly combined, you can now add water. So adding water will now form your emulsion. So it's that easy. You literally just need powder feel, some oils to disperse powder feel, and water. So you will now get a, as you can see here, very pleasing, very white emulsion. So you can alter the concentration of powder feel to make lotions, creams, even gel creams. So it's that easy. You can play around with it with the ratios of the oils, water, and powder feel. So after water has been added slowly, we can add now the preservative. So GeoGuard Boost PHC is a broad spectrum preservative. So, so as you can see here, the addition of the preservative doesn't affect the viscosity at all of powder. And then, oh yeah, that's basically it. See how simple it is to use powder feel to create the cream in your kit. So how thick it is, how pleasingly glossy and white this cream is. So yes, as simple as that, you now have your cream base. So this cream base is now pretty much ready to use, but its sensory is okay. Its sensory is really okay, but it can be better, I think. So that's where these five sensory modifiers come in. So all of these five sensory modifiers in the kit are entirely code processable, all of them. So since they're code processable, they're perfect for our little demo because we will literally just mix them with like a spatula or even just your hands and it will combine completely. But this also gives, like, of course, real benefits during production, since they are number one, they're a lot more sustainable because you don't use a lot of electricity in heating. And number two, it's more cost efficient because of which is what I said, you don't heat them. And number three, they usually don't require high shears. So you can literally just use low shear mixers. As you can see, as you will see later, we will just literally use our hands to mix them. So you don't need a homogenizer to incorporate these five in that cream base. So let's take a look on the particulars of each sensory modifier. So to follow along, what I would do if you have a separate container is to take a dollop of the cream with like your finger or a spatula if you have it. Just take like this size. Maybe this is too much. Maybe this size. Maybe this size is perfect. And then you can add it on your. I don't have a container, but if you do have a container, like a small bowl or something, just take a dollop of that, and then a small, very smallish addition of the sensory modifier uh, and the screen. So we will be checking out GANP first. So Grand Hydrogyl GANP is Inky name, it's water, glycerin, and glyceryl polyacrylate. So this is the clear gel in the kit. So just take a small amount of GMP, maybe like this size, and then combine that to the cream base in your container or in your hand. And you can just like mix it and it will combine completely. So Grand Hydrogyl GANP, it's basically a delivery system of glycerin. So, but unlike glycerin, which is famous for being like super tacky, green hydrogen GNP is like not at all. It's very light, but at the same time, it gives a cushioning effect, like what we've said a while ago, the substantive feeling like a pillow. So, green hydrogen GNP is a great moisturizer as well. So it doesn't dry even when it's exposed to air for months, literally months. So if you want something that's if you want a sensory that's very fresh, very light, but you don't want the greasy, tacky feel of a glycerin, then go with grenadine GMP. Next one, we have Grancil SIW026. So Grancil SIW026 is cyclomethicone, dimethicone, polysilicone 11, butylene glycol water, and acyl glucoside. So this is quite a unique ingredient, the Grancil SIW series. So these are elastomers and powders of silicone that have a unique transforming sensation. So let's open. My hands are quite slippery because of the cream. So yeah, let's open this. And finally, so this is SRW026. It's the translucent gel like ingredient. So like what I've said, they are transforming sensory ingredients because when you're using SIWs during application, they will give a very substantive cushioning effect. But upon rabat, upon after rabat, after application, they will even out into a very satisfying powdery sensation. So 026 and 066, which is also part of your kit, they have that same transforming texture. However, 026 has more volatile contents in it, so the cushioning effect isn't as strong. So if you want something lighter, but you still want that transforming effect, use 26. But if you want a richer, fuller, more substantive feel, go with 066. So we actually have at least like a dozen products under the Grancil SAW line. So some of them have shea butter, some of them have actives in it. So if you want to know more about this transforming ingredient, please do contact me via the Q&A or email. And then we have 66, like what I said a while ago. This is a bit more rich because it doesn't have cyclomethicone in it, unlike 026. So 066, this is another translucent gel, but it has a higher yield and higher viscosity compared to 026. Ooh, it's gonna fall. So yeah, 66 it will not because the yield is quite high and the viscosity as well. And then if you actually want to try, what you want to do is, if you want to compare, I mean, what you can do is you can take the cream base as is, apply it on your skin, and take note of the sensory that you get. So I get a very moist, very medium slip, low absorbency, zero, almost no powdery sensation at all. But if you combine a certain amount of the cream and then a certain amount of 026 together, and then apply it on your skin, you can feel that during rubbing, it's a bit more substantive than the neat cream. But for some reason, the playtime will actually shorten. And then you get, yeah, you get this very pleasing powdery sensation that I did not get at all with the cream as is. So please play along with the ingredients. This is just an initial demo, so you don't really have to like go to the your scale and weigh them to get to use the doses that I have shown in the presentation. But you will get the idea of how the sensory modifiers will affect the texture of your formulation. So the fourth one, we have grand powder QSA. So QSA is a PSQ, polymethyl sesquioxane, that has been treated with silica. So PSQ is a very high performing spherical silicone powder. So it gives an intense, very intense powdery sensation. But treating that PSQ with silica, it will make the PSQ a lot more dispersible in water. So if your formulation has a high content of water, QSA would be a better choice since it will actually enhance the stability of your formulation. So QSA, it gives, of course, it gives the powdery effect since it is a PSQ, and it also gives the high slip and fluidity since it is a powder. But it also decreases any tacky feeling that you may have in your formulation. So maybe again, what you want to do is just take your cream base, add some QSA, and then apply to your skin. So you will immediately notice that you get that very satisfying powdery finish quite quickly. And it's very easily combined because the treatment with silica, again, makes it easier to be dispersed in water, which this cream has a lot of. And I think the last one is Grand Primo 1005, which is 65% dimethicone that has been dispersed and pre-emulsified in water with polysilicon filament. So this is a delivery system of, again, pre-emulsified silicone elastomers. So this is somewhat like SIW, but it's not as powdery. It's more elastomer-like. So it's a lot more substantive And it doesn't end at that powdery finish like what we get with SIW, but it's still very pleasing. That characteristic silicone feel. So it delivers a quite a rich, very bouncy application with a velvety, not so much powdery finish. So yeah, if you want to try, you can literally just take the raw material as is and apply it to your skin. It's very substantive, and the finish is very satisfying, very velvety though, not really powdery. And if you've been working with dimethicone in the laboratory, you know it's quite a headache to formulate with. It's hard to disperse. So this pre-emulsified version will take that headache away from you to make your life a lot more easier since it's easily dispersed in water. So I implore you to play around with the kit. Combine several raw materials into your cream base. Uh, Try the raw materials by themselves. Try them in combination with the cream and other raw materials. Up to you. We do carry a lot more than these five raw materials. So if you want to know more about these sensory modifiers or the other ingredients in our portfolio, please do contact me again via email, or you can ask your questions in the Q&A section, which will happen pretty much I think right now. So thank you very much. And any questions?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jim Yumang, for that insightful presentation. To proceed with our Q&A portion, Mr. Jim, open your camera, please. Okay, Mr. Jim is here already. To our audience, don't be shy and just type your questions into the Q&A chat box below. If we're not able to answer all submitted questions during today's webinar, we'll be sure to share them with our speaker and send you the reply. So, okay, Mr. Jim, are you ready with the Q&A?
Go ahead, Christian. Thank
Okay,
you.
so far we have I believe you answered some of the questions on the chat box.
Yeah, I was
But
excited. Sorry.
yeah, but now we still have more three questions from the audience. So one question is from
Yes.
Miss Emma. So the question is: apart from ease of use, what are the benefits of using cold process ingredients?
Oh yeah. So for cold process ingredients, ease of use is definitely one of the biggest benefits, but it also is beneficial in terms of sustainability and economic advantages. So for example, when you're using cold process ingredients, you don't use heating because it's cold process, and you usually don't use like high shear. So when you don't use heating or high shear, you're not like uh, using more fuel, more energy, which in turn is more sustainable. And also, it's also easier in your wallet because again, you're not doing special processes in your manufacturing.
Okay. So second question is from Miss Precious Joy Abelada. The question is powder pill also a thickener?
Yes, yes. Powder feel first and foremost is a general emulsifier. So when you combine water and oil and powder feel in it, you make an instant emulsion just by mixing it. So while it's emulsifying, it also thickens your entire system quite quickly and quite significantly. But it's also dose dependent. So for example, at 2% of powder feel will be thinner than at 3% of powder feel. So if later, if you're interested in this kit, with the base cream, which is made with powder feel, and our sensory modifiers. Uh, uh, can I actually add something in the chat box? Let me share a website. So if you remember the QR
Sure,
that was up
sure.
for a few seconds a while ago, yeah, this
Sure.
actually redirects to a website that I have made. So this will give you more details
Okay.
regarding the kit and the rest of my presentation.
Okay. Sure, Mr. Jim. So next on the second question, what makes the ingredients sustainable if they are not natural? It's quite very interesting question.
One of the points, yeah, one of the points I would like to stress is that the fact that natural does not always equate to sustainable. So those two are not mutually exclusive. Like for example, palm oil. So palm oil is a 100% natural ingredient derived from palm, of course, but it also has a huge detrimental effect in the ecosystems. Like for example, in Indonesia, the farming of palm oil has resulted to the destruction of rainforests, which are of course necessary for the ecosystem, especially as they are habitats for diverse flora and fauna. So I'm not saying that the raw materials there is by themselves very sustainable, but they are more sustainable compared to conventional silicones, to conventional synthetics, because of the fact that they are cold process, which are again they give the benefits of sustainability due to the decreased use of energy and fuels.
Okay, thank
So I
you,
hope
sir.
that answers the question.
Okay, so let's go on to the last question from Mr. Richard Magallanes. Is Grand Premul 1005 can be used in cold process? And is it EcoCert?
Grand Primo is definitely usable for cold process. So all of the raw materials in the kit. If you want to request for the kit, I have, I have prepared some of the kits. Just go to the website. I have added to the chat. So yeah, all of them are all cold processable. But for the EcoCert, let me check first. I will get back to you, Sir Richard, with that information.
Okay, our time is up now. Thank you to everyone who joined this webinar, and we hope that you enjoy our sharing session. Before we finally end our webinar, Mr. Jim, do you have anything you want to say?
Yes. If you guys have any other questions, like, or if you have requests for samples for the kit, prototypes, you can contact me via in the chat box in the website. Just
Yeah.
type in your request there, and that's it basically. So thank you for attending.
Okay. Once again, thank you to Mr. Jim, of course, to our audience. We're extremely grateful and we appreciate your attention and participation. This webinar will not be successful without you. We hope to continue to see you on our series of webinars today. And don't forget to visit our virtual booths at Beauty Space 2021. Stay safe, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Sir
Bye
Jim.
bye.